Welcome to Meow Diaries, stories designed to help you relax and fall asleep. Tonight, I have prepared a new story for you. Before we start the story, I would love for you to support the channel. Just click like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments how you are feeling tonight. It means a lot to me, even if it's just a word. But before we begin, I would like to share a little secret that can help you relax and fall asleep more easily. Instead of just listening, try to imagine each scene vividly. The colors, the sounds, even the smells. The more your mind gets into the game, the more it will calm down and gently guide you to sleep. Let's take a deep breath. Slowly, and exhale gently. Again, inhale and exhale. Feel your body relax. Feel your thoughts begin to fade away. Now find a comfortable position. Close your eyes, and let's begin the story. Merged from shadows, as if it were the shadow itself, the moonlight was fractured through thin cloud veils, casting an uneven light that made the stone curve shimmer like wet porcelain. The air was cool, but held a trace of warmth from the day's sun, fading now to a hush as night deepened. A faint chime echoed from somewhere unseen, a sound too delicate to come from metal or glass, more like the subtle rustle of wind through hanging eucalyptus leaves. The cat paused, its ears flicking forward as if listening to the earth itself, nose quivering at the mingling scents of old wood, dust, and lavender fading beneath the rising night chill. The cat's fur, a soft tapestry of gray, mottled with cream, caught the moonlight in subtle ripples as it moved. It walked with a kind of measured grace, paws making no sound on the worn cobblestones underfoot. There was a softness to the way its body shifted, each step a silent question poised against the unanswering hush of the archway. The stones felt cool beneath its pads, carrying the stored warmth of the day that seeped upward and then vanished. Like a memory the cat could almost touch but not hold, it came to the archway's center, where the shadows thickened and the light from the moon broke apart entirely, and sat with its tail curling delicately around its front paws. For a long moment, it seemed as though the cat itself was part of the stone, a living curl of shadow shaped by the edges of the world. Its eyes, wide and pale green, reflected the moonlight faintly, making them gleam like shallow pools where secrets might be kept. The scent of lavender lingered in the air, tinged with the faint mineral tang of the stone. Beyond the archway, a door stood half seen in the distance, almost melted into the shadow of an old wall. Its surface was worn smooth by years of wind and touch, though no hand had graced its handle for longer than the cat could remember. It was a door without purpose now, yet it held the air of something waiting, something that once promised passage, but now offered only silence. The cat's gaze drifted there, to the faint outline of the keyhole, just visible in the moonlight's uneven glow. It did not move toward it, not yet. Instead, it sat in the quiet, as if patience itself were its language. A thin breeze threaded through the archway, carrying with it the delicate scent of earth, eucalyptus, and the faintest hint of salt from the distant sea. It made the cat's whiskers stir, though its body remained still. It was a waiting posture, but not one of urgency or tension. Rather, it was the kind of waiting that had no beginning and no expected end. The cat's breathing was slow, almost imperceptible, a rise and fall as measured as the shifting of the light on the stone. Its tail, lightly curved like a half moon, trembled once at the tip and then stilled again. A moth fluttered past, its wings whispering against the air like dry silk, and the cat's eyes tracked its movement for a moment before returning to the space ahead. The moth's delicate presence stirred a faint memory, not a sharp image, but more a texture of feeling, something almost like the sensation of sun-warmed wood beneath fur, or the echo of a chime that had once been louder, closer. The cat's ears twitched, catching the subtle shifts in sound around it. The faint crackle of a leaf drifting across stone, the distant, rhythmic pulse of waves against unseen shorelines. For a time, the cat simply sat there, surrounded by the cool hush of the archway, the stones, the moonlight. The space itself seemed to hold its breath around the cat, the way old places do when they sense something more attuned to silence than sound. Its fur lifted gently as the breeze passed, then smoothed again as if the night itself were smoothing down thoughts before sleep. The moonlight, shifting between clouds, touched the cat's face, tracing its delicate features with a silvery softness, illuminating the edges of ears, the curve of whiskers, the smooth arch of its back. The cat's eyes half-lidded, not with sleep, but with a kind of watchfulness that had no demand behind it. It watched the keyhole without expectation, as though it understood that the waiting itself was the purpose, not the unlocking. The lavender scent grew fainter, replaced by the subtler, drier scent of dust warmed by stone. The chime sounded again, even softer this time, almost as if it were inside the cat's own ears, rather than carried by air. A soft rustle came from the far side of the archway, where the wall met the shadow. A lizard, perhaps, or the delicate shift of ivy along brick. The cat's ears turned fractionally, acknowledging the sound, but not reacting to it, as though the knowledge of it was enough. It breathed in, slow and steady, drawing in the scent of the earth beneath the stone and the lingering trace of eucalyptus above. When the moonlight brightened once more, silvering the entire archway in a delicate glow, the cat's form seemed almost insubstantial, as though it might dissolve into the air if touched by anything more than a breath. Its tail curled tighter around its paws, and for the first time, its head lowered slightly, as if nodding to an unseen companion. There was no sound, no movement from the door beyond, no key turning in the lock, but the cat's waiting posture softened, a curve of acceptance within the silence. The night deepened, shadow folding around the stones like dark silk. The air cooled further, carrying the mingled scents of lavender and dust, and a faint trace of dampness that whispered of morning's approach. The cat's breathing slowed again, matching the subtle pulse of the world around it. It closed its eyes, not fully, but enough that the moonlight painted its lids with a faint glow. Its tail twitched once more, the tip brushing the stone softly, like a signature written in silence. And there, Beneath the moonlit archway, the cat waited, not for a sound, not for a key to turn, but simply because waiting was what it knew. In the stillness, it found a kind of quiet companionship with the stone, the shadows, and the door that had long forgotten how to open. The night had thickened like a silk veil around the edges of the world. The cat moved from beneath the archway, its steps so light they seemed more an impression left upon air than stone. It padded towards the door it had regarded from afar, each paw step a soft punctuation in the quiet. The air here was cooler, touched with the delicate scent of eucalyptus and the faintest dampness that lingered in shaded spaces. It smelled of hidden things, of secrets pressed between stone and wood, of the quiet sighs of a garden beyond reach. The door was old, older than the cat could conceive in its quiet thoughts. Its wood had once been polished smooth, but now it was furrowed with fine lines, like the creases left by gentle hands pressing cloth. The paint had faded to the palest of grays, and the edges of the panels had softened beneath the slow, patient touch of time. The cat approached, nose nearly brushing the surface, and inhaled deeply. The scent of aged wood mingled with a subtle note of rain, though no rain had fallen for days. It was as if the door still remembered the touch of water, the way earth remembers sky. Its ears flicked forward, straining toward the keyhole, which was just large enough for a whisper to pass through. The cat tilted its head, listening, not for the clatter of footsteps or the jangle of keys, but for something subtler. There was a sound, faint and elusive, like the breath of air caught between two leaves, or the hush of wind shifting through the slats of an old fence. The cat pressed closer, placing one soft paw against the door, claws sheathed. Its weight barely stirred, the dust clinging to the threshold. The wind brushed past again, threading through the keyhole like a ribbon of sound. It carried with it a fragrance, faint and almost impossible to name, perhaps a memory of wattle blossoms, sweet and ephemeral, or the hint of lemon myrtle crushed beneath passing paws. The cat's breath caught, chest rising ever so slightly, and its eyes closed halfway, as if tasting the scent through its very bones. It was not a scent it could chase or claim, but one that left a ghost of warmth in the air, a softness just out of reach. For a long moment, the cat stood like that, its body a sculpted curve against the door, listening to the imagined whispers within the keyhole. They spoke not in words, but in the language of memory, the way the scent of certain leaves might summon an image of warmth, or the coolness of stone might recall the shadow of a forgotten afternoon. The cat's tail curved slowly behind it, brushing the dust in a loose arc. It did not expect an answer, nor the click of a key turning. It listened because listening was the closest it could come to entering. The sound within the keyhole shifted subtly, or perhaps it was only the cat's imagination that twisted it into something more tangible. It was as though the door breathed a sigh, a sound that resonated low and soft, like the distant murmur of waves against a quiet shore. The cat's fur rippled along its spine, not with fear, but with the recognition of something deeply familiar, a sound heard long ago, perhaps in dreams, perhaps in the gentle rhythm of a heartbeat remembered only in sleep. A small moth alighted Near the edge of the doorframe, its wings dusted with a powdery silver that caught the moonlight in delicate shimmerings. It rested there, fragile and unmoving, as though it too listened to the whispers of the keyhole. The cat's eyes shifted, following the moth's stillness, and for a moment, cat and insect shared a silence more profound than any sound. The air between them felt almost tangible, like a silk thread, stretched taut and humming with unspoken understanding. The cat lowered its head, resting its chin lightly against the cool wood of the door. Its breath was steady, a slow rhythm that matched the faint pulse of the night. The scent of eucalyptus deepened as a breeze curled through the archway behind, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves and the soft click of twigs shifting against stone. The cat did not turn to look. It remained with the door, the keyhole, and the moth, as though the world beyond them had faded into quiet. A thought, or perhaps a feeling, drifted through the cat's mind, as light and insubstantial as the scent of wattle flowers, that the door had never truly been locked, not in the way humans understand locks and keys. Rather, it was held closed by time itself, by the weight of moments layered like thin sheets of mica, delicate and unbreakable. The key had never turned because it was not a key for hands or metal, but for something softer, like waiting, like breath. The cat drew back a fraction, its ears still tilted toward the keyhole, as though reluctant to lose the thread of sound. It blinked slowly, the movement smooth and deliberate, a gesture that might have been a sigh if cats could sigh. The moth fluttered its wings once, a delicate tremor of silver, then settled again. The cat's paw, still resting lightly against the wood, flexed and relaxed, the claws unsheathing just enough to catch on the grain before retracting. The hush of the night deepened, the breeze growing softer until it was no more than a breath against the fur. The moon, partially obscured by a trailing ribbon of cloud, cast a diffuse glow that softened the lines of the door and the cat alike. They seemed to merge with the shadowed stone, becoming part of the quiet itself. The cat's tail curved along the ground, tracing a loose spiral before it stilled completely, a final whisper of scent. This time a hint of rain on dust, the barest memory of water against dry earth, rose from the keyhole. The cat's whiskers trembled faintly, and it let its eyes close, not from sleep, but from the peace of the moment. It was not waiting for the door to open now, nor for the key to turn. It was simply present, breathing in the layered scents and the hush of whispered nothings, content to exist within the space where door, keyhole, and waiting all blurred into one. And as the moth finally lifted, wings brushing the air with a softness too delicate to hear, the cat remained, head lowered against the door, listening to the silence that held both promise and acceptance. Moonlight slipped between branches, soft as the trailing hem of a forgotten gown. Silence pressed into the garden, not heavy, but close, as though it wished to be noticed. The cat stepped from the shadows, with the ease of water finding its path, movements barely disturbing the thick scent of jasmine that curled low to the ground. Somewhere above, a breeze stirred silver leaves into a quiet conversation. Unlike the hush of the stone archway, this garden felt alive in its stillness, each leaf trembling as though listening to something far away. The cat halted under a low arch of branches, head tilted, eyes tracing the flickering patterns of light that quivered over mossy stones. No breeze touched the cat's fur here. The air held its breath, rich with the green scent of crushed stems and the deeper sweetness of blossoms not yet opened. A silver moth drifted lazily past, wings illuminated for a heartbeat before fading into shadow. The cat's gaze followed, but its body remained a curve of quietness, as though unwilling to disrupt the fragile balance of hush. At the fountain's edge, where moonlight pooled like liquid glass, the air thickened with the scent of earth, damp with old rain. Without a sound, the cat placed one paw on the worn stone, feeling the cool smoothness where moss had grown soft and spongy. The fountain's basin, though dry, cradled a collection of fallen petals, tiny white and gold fragments, scattered by unseen breezes. A leaf detached from an overhead branch, its descent a slow spiral through the hush. It did not startle the cat, who simply watched its journey with a stillness that felt deeper than mere patience. The leaf landed gently against a paw, curling there like a fragile token. A faint creak echoed from deeper within the garden, a shifting branch perhaps, or the quiet sigh of wood giving way beneath its own weight. The cat's ears flicked toward the sound, but made no move to investigate. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, nostrils drawing in the layered scents that mingled beneath the silvered canopy. Jasmine, wattle, the tang of eucalyptus, and the faint memory of rain on dry bark. Behind the cat, a path threaded through the undergrowth, worn smooth by countless nights of passing paws. It was not a trail made by decision, but by the gentle pull of habit, as though the earth itself had invited such quiet wanderings. Rather than returning to the door, the cat turned toward this path, paws sinking into a patch of moss as soft as breath. A trickle of moonlight followed along the cat's spine, highlighting the delicate rise and fall of fur with each step. The air remained cool, but not cold, carrying with it a suggestion of salt and earth. Somewhere beyond the garden, waves might have been breaking on a distant shore, though the sound never quite reached this enclosed space. Pausing beneath a twisted wattle tree, the cat brushed its side against the rough trunk, leaving behind a faint dusting of silvered fur. The bark, warm and textured under the moon's light, gave no response but seemed to acknowledge the touch in its quiet, unmoving way. The leaves above trembled, releasing a brief cascade of scent, sharp and green, and just a little bitter. Further into the clearing, where the shadows lay thick and velvety, the cat found a patch of ground littered with fallen blossoms. Each petal gleamed faintly, as if painted with moonlight, and the scent there was heavy with sweetness. The cat settled itself with slow, deliberate grace, paws folded beneath its body, tail curling close. It did not sleep, but rested with eyes half-lidded, breathing in the night's layered perfumes. A moth returned, landing on a blossom near the cat's forepaw. Its wings quivered, silent and shimmering, a presence so light it barely pressed into the petals. The cat watched, ears tilting forward ever so slightly. There was no movement beyond that, no lunge, no curiosity driven by hunger, just the quiet observation of life sharing space. As the moth lifted off and disappeared into the dark canopy, the cat remained, still and at ease, as though the garden itself had woven around it. There was no sense of waiting for the door now, no echo of the key or its imagined turning. Here, under branches, woven like threads of silver and shadow, the cat simply was. Breath rose and fell in an even rhythm, matched by the gentle pulse of night around it. Petals clung to fur, dew settling along whiskers, scents threading into each slow inhale. Time thinned until it felt less like something measured and more like a soft current drifting past, carrying the hush of leaves and the slow drift of moonlight. When the breeze finally stirred again, brushing a faint salt sweetness into the air, the cat stretched, a ripple of muscle beneath silvered fur. It rose slowly, without haste, and moved back through the garden's meandering path, leaving behind no mark except the faint, shifting scent of wattle and earth. Under the archway, shadows pooled more deeply, but the cat passed through them without pause. No thought pressed against its mind now, no door waiting to be opened, no key that might yet turn. There was only the layered night, the hush of leaves, and the simple act of moving forward. Quiet deepened as night folded itself more closely around the cat. The air pressed cooler against its fur, and beneath the archway's soft curve, the scent of moss and aged iron gathered faintly, as though the stones themselves exhaled forgotten stories. Without urgency, the cat stepped forward, paws brushing softly against dust that rose and settled in its wake like fine silk. Memories didn't arrive with fanfare, but slipped quietly, like a change in the air's texture. The cat's nose twitched, detecting something almost lost to time, the ghost of rain on stone, a fleeting warmth carried on the air, and a hint of something familiar that tugged lightly at its senses. A low wall stood ahead, half draped in ivy, whose leaves trembled in the faintest breeze. Moonlight barely touched the wall, but the cat felt its roughness as it rubbed lightly against the cool surface, leaving behind a faint trace of warmth. It wasn't the wall itself that mattered, but the space beyond it, just out of reach, like the outline of a memory too distant to grasp. Once, long ago, or perhaps only imagined, the cat had stood at another door. That door had yielded with a soft click, its key turning easily in the hand of someone unseen. The sound of it lived not as a clear echo, but as a faint pressure behind the eyes, as if memory itself carried weight. No scent remained from that moment, only the trace of warmth, like sun on aged wood, and the quiet release of breath. Wind crept along the ground, bringing with it a trace of eucalyptus, sharpness layered over the lingering sweetness of jasmine. The cat sat, tail wrapping around its paws, and let its eyes slip half-closed, listening not for sound, but for the shift of air and scent, the subtle rearrangement of the world as night deepened. Ivy rustled against the wall, a soft friction like fabric brushing skin. The cat's ears flicked toward the sound, then settled again, as if recognizing an old tune hummed just beneath hearing. Its whiskers stirred against the air's gentle weight, collecting faint moisture from the dew gathering along the leaves. A memory, too light to settle, but too insistent to ignore. teased the cat's thoughts, a feeling of stepping through a door into warmth, the brush of something soft underfoot, and the quiet murmur of a familiar voice. It was not a sharp recollection, not a picture or a sound, but a weightless echo that curved into the space behind its ribs. Further along the wall, where moonlight fractured into silver shards, a small vine had twisted itself into a delicate spiral. The cat's gaze lingered there, tracing the line of the vine as though reading a map of forgotten things. Its body softened, tension unspooling from shoulders and spine, until it felt less like waiting and more like resting within the rhythm of the night. A moth, pale and nearly translucent, flitted close to the cat's whiskers. It paused mid-flight, hovering just long enough for the cat's breath to brush its wings. Instead of chasing, the cat remained still, watching the moth's fragile trembling with a quiet understanding. In this space, movement was not necessary. The world arranged itself gently around stillness. A subtle change in the scent drew the cat's attention, the barest trace of rusted iron, like the memory of a key held too long in a damp pocket. It was not strong, not immediate, but laced through the jasmine and eucalyptus, like a whisper woven into a song. The cat rose, slowly, stretching its spine in a long, silent curve, and pressed its nose lightly to the ivy-covered wall. No door was there, but the sense of one lingered, folded into stone and leaf, held in the quiet hush of night. Fur along, the cat's back lifted faintly as another breeze passed through, carrying a cool sharpness that spoke of approaching dawn. It breathed in, slow and steady, letting the mixture of scents settle deep, anchoring it in the moment. Nothing would change tonight. The door would remain closed, the key unturned. But there was comfort in the quiet, in the soft presence of stone and leaf, scent and breeze. Without turning, the cat allowed its gaze to drift upward, following the curve of ivy against the wall where moonlight touched the highest leaves. The memory of warmth, of a key turning and a door yielding, did not fade, but settled deeper into the quiet spaces between breaths. It was not a story of loss, but of continuity, a recognition that doors need not open to have meaning, that waiting could itself become a kind of arrival. With a slow, deliberate step, the cat turned from the wall and moved back toward the path, each paw fall a quiet imprint in the dust. Its tail traced a soft arc behind it, stirring fallen leaves that whispered as they shifted. No glance was given to the door hidden beyond shadows. No tension in the waiting, only presence, only the measured exhale of breath into the thickening night. Mist gathered in the low spaces of the garden, coiling softly around the bases of trees and the stone path, a pale shroud that made the world seem dream-carved. The cat stepped lightly into this veil, pause, leaving only the briefest suggestion of passage. Its movements held no urgency, only the quiet continuity of presence, as though it understood the garden's language, the slow exhale of air, the shiver of petals, the hush of waiting. Not far ahead, moonlight caught the edge of a standing stone, glinting pale silver across its rough surface. Around it, shadows layered thick as fabric folds, some sharp-edged, some dissolving into the mist. As the cat approached, A sense of familiarity hummed low and steady beneath its skin, like a remembered vibration. There was no sound, only the sensation of something near, a companion, not of body, but of essence. It wasn't that another cat had appeared. Rather, the cat's own shadow, stretched and warped by moonlight and mist, had gathered beside it, no longer merely a flat echo on the ground, but a presence with weight, a subtle counterpart. The cat paused, feeling the shift, not as a startle, but as a soft recognition. The shadow curved beside it, mirroring its posture, as though acknowledging a shared experience of solitude. Breath stirred in the air. Whether from the cat or the shadow was impossible to say. Leaves whispered in the gentle draft that slid through the garden, carrying with it the scent of wet stone and a faint trace of sea salt, delicate and sharp. The cat lowered itself to the ground, tail curling loosely, and the shadow followed, folding into the mist with a grace that felt both familiar and strange. Between breaths, the cat felt an easing, as though the garden itself had shifted to make space for this silent companion. The waiting, which had held the quiet tension of expectation, softened into something lighter, almost like a shared joke between old friends. There was no conversation, no overt connection, but a steady comfort in the presence of something that moved when the cat moved, that waited without impatience, that existed alongside without need. A breeze teased the surface of the mist, lifting it into ripples that coiled around the stones and brushed lightly against the cat's whiskers. It smelled of eucalyptus and moss, layered with the faint sweetness of jasmine. High above, the moon filtered through thin clouds, silvering the garden and outlining the shapes of trees and stones in delicate tracery. The shadow's edges blurred and sharpened in rhythm with the shifting light, its form anchored to the cat, but moving with a quiet independence. A moth, wings dusted with moonlight, alighted briefly on a stone near the cat's forepaws, its presence barely noticed, except for the soft disturbance of air as it settled. The cat's eyes flicked toward it, pupils narrowing, but no movement followed. Instead, it remained still, allowing the moth's delicate dance to continue uninterrupted. The shadow, too, seemed to watch, though its gaze was invisible and its thoughts unreadable. In the hush, the sound of distant waves, faint, irregular, like a memory rather than a presence, threaded through the garden. It did not pull the cat's attention, but rather folded into the night's layered quiet, another texture of waiting. Beneath this, the shadow's presence seemed to deepen, not as something cast by light, but as an entity that could not exist without the cat's own presence to anchor it. Without rising, the cat shifted its weight, leaning slightly into the shadow's form, and for a moment it felt less alone. The gesture was not of dependence, but of acknowledgement, an acceptance that waiting need not be solitary, that even the quiet absence of company could hold meaning. The garden's scents thickened, wrapping the cat in a blend of damp earth and fading blossoms, the air cool and still. A silver leaf, carried by a stray breeze, drifted down between cat and shadow, landing softly on the stone path. It settled, without sound, its presence a gentle mark of the moment's quietness. The cat's gaze lingered on it, tracing its delicate edges, before returning to the garden's hush. Breath moved between them, slow and even, as though the cat and its shadow shared the same measured rhythm. One presence folded into another. In the rising hush, a thin cloud slid across the moon, dimming the light until the shadow blurred into the mist, its edges softening like ink in water. The cat remained, body relaxed and eyes half closed, untroubled by the change. Whether the shadow would return when the moonlight brightened again was a question that need not be answered. Its presence had already left a quiet imprint, a suggestion of companionship that lingered even in its absence. As the moon's glow returned, brushing the garden's edges with pale light, the cat rose. It stretched slowly, each movement unhurried, and turned back toward the archway. The shadow moved with it, trailing behind like a whisper, merging with the shifting patterns of leaves and mist. Together, they crossed the stones without sound, the cat's steps light, the shadow's form soft and steady. There was no need to look back. In this space where shadow and form, presence and absence intertwined, the cat had found not a key, not an opening door, but a quiet companionship that softened the edges of waiting. A single wattle blossom floated down from the branches, its pale yellow petals catching in the cat's fur like a gentle fingerprint. It didn't shake the petal away. Instead, it remained still beneath the archway, the cool air slipping quietly over its shoulders, the weight of morning creeping in from the edges of the garden. Not far beyond, the door remained as it always had, closed, untouched, with no sign of movement or promise of change. The cat's attention drifted toward it briefly, not with expectation, but with a soft, absent thought, before it returned to the path of scattered petals underfoot. A cool breeze slipped between the ivy-covered stones, twisting up the scent of dew-laden leaves and earth still damp from an old rain. Rather than approach the door, the cat shifted its weight and moved toward the wattle tree, where branches arched low and leaves formed delicate, quivering patterns against the pale sky. Silence deepened in the space between leaves and stone. Though it was not an empty silence, it was filled with the faint breath of wind and the muted whisper of falling petals. The cat's paws pressed lightly into the moss, the softness rising against its pads, while its tail brushed a shallow arc through dust that hadn't been disturbed in days. A single thought surfaced, light as a moth's wing. Perhaps waiting was not meant to be answered. The cat's ears twitched, acknowledging the notion without resistance, before tilting toward the faint rustle of a leaf caught in the wind. Long shadows stretched across the ground, folding gently into each other as dawn's suggestion softened the edges of night. The cat's eyes, half-lidded and drowsy, traced the slow unraveling of moonlight as it yielded to the pale hush of morning. There was no urgency to this transition, only a quiet rhythm, like breath or the slow release of a held note. Somewhere deeper, in the garden, a faint click echoed, perhaps the shift of a stone against another, or the delicate snap of a branch. The cat didn't turn its head, but listened, letting the sound fold into the fabric of waiting. It wasn't the sound of a key turning, nor of a door opening, but a reminder that even in silence, small movements marked the passage of time. A moth brushed past the cat's whiskers, its wings trembling faintly, the fragile sound like silk slipping against itself. It hovered near a wattle blossom before disappearing into the folds of ivy. The cat's gaze followed, not with longing, but with a gentle awareness of the moment's fleeting nature. Above, the branches stirred, releasing a shower of petals that drifted down like soft confetti. Some caught in the cat's fur, others settled against the moss where dew began to gather. With a slow stretch, the cat pressed its paws deeper into the earth, the weight of its body merging with the textures of stone, leaf, and light. The locked door remained unchanged, as quiet and unmoving as the cat's own breath. Yet something in the waiting had shifted, not in the door, not in the world, but within the soft acceptance of the cat's presence. It no longer felt like a question held in tension, but a simple acknowledgement. The key may never turn, and that was enough. A faint light touched the edges of the garden now, a thin wash of dawn that painted the silver leaves with a pale, forgiving glow. The cat rose, slow and unhurried, paws silent against stone. It moved, without looking back, leaving behind the petal-strewn ground and the locked door that waited without need. With each step, it carried the quiet weight of unanswered questions, questions that no longer sought answers, but simply existed, like the garden's own hush, layered and enduring. Morning's light arrived gently, pressing itself against the garden's edges with a softness too subtle to name. The cat lingered beneath the archway, where stone met shadow, its form a quiet silhouette against the pale spill of dawn. There was no urgency in its stance, only the smooth, even rise of breath, the stillness that comes not from waiting, but from having waited long enough. Beyond the garden, a faint blush of gold traced the sky, coloring the horizon with the promise of warmth. Light crept across the mossy stones and curled against the trunks of trees, lifting the night's cool veil and replacing it with a whisper of heat. The cat stretched, a long ripple from paw to tail, its fur illuminated in delicate patterns that shifted with the early light. A breeze, lighter now than before, stirred the wattle branches, sending a small flurry of petals tumbling to the ground. They caught the dawn's glow as they fell, scattering like confetti in a celebration too quiet for words. The cat stepped lightly among them, leaving no mark but the gentle displacement of air and scent, jasmine, eucalyptus, the faint salt of distant seas. The door, unchanged and unyielding, stood in the same silence it had held through the night. The cat didn't look toward it. Instead, its attention shifted outward to the slender streaks of light that fractured through the trees, to the hush of a world stretching into wakefulness. The key might never turn, the door might never open, but in the quiet space between breath and movement, something softer stirred, the recognition that waiting itself could be its own kind of peace. Birdsong punctuated the silence, tentative and light, weaving through the branches with a fragile persistence. The cat's ears twitched at the sound, catching its rhythm, but not pursuing it. Instead, it settled into a sitting posture once more, tail curling neatly around its paws, eyes half-lidded against the rising light. There was no need to move forward, no need to press against the door, no need to seek an answer to the quiet question it had carried. A moth drifted close, pale and near transparent in the dawn, its wings trembling with the weight of fragile persistence. It hovered near the cat's whiskers, brushing against them like the faintest question. The cat remained motionless, letting the moth's presence pass unmarked, its own breath a gentle counterpoint to the world's shifting light. Dew gathered on the petals, scattered along the stone path, refracting dawn's light into small bright points that glittered briefly before fading. The cat's gaze followed one such point as it trembled on a wattle blossom's edge, waiting for gravity or breeze to carry it away. It was a small thing, almost invisible, but the cat watched it as though it held all the world's quiet truths. The door would remain closed, the key unworn and untouched, yet the weight of its presence no longer pressed against the cat's thoughts. In the hush of morning, it became just another shape in the garden, a part of the stillness, no more significant than the soft curve of a leaf or the drift of a moth's wings. A final breeze lifted, carrying with it the scent of dew-warmed grass and the gentle murmur of leaves greeting the day. The cat rose once more, not with decision, but with the easy grace of movement. Without purpose, it walked along the stone path, past the wattle blossoms and mossy stones, past the memory of the door, and into the stretch of light that spilled beyond the garden's edge. With each step, the shadows grew thinner, replaced by a soft golden glow that wrapped the cat in warmth. No door creaked open behind it, no key turned in a long-forgotten lock, only the layered hush of dawn's breath, the low pulse of birdsong, and the subtle satisfaction of waiting well and moving on. As the last trace of shadow slipped from its fur, the cat glanced back, not at the door, but at the place where the garden folded into stone and light. For a moment, it stood there, bathed in the soft weight of morning, before continuing forward, not searching, not waiting, but simply moving, each pawfall a gentle release of breath into a world waking from quiet sleep.